streaming just because it takes a minute to connect. And I will also start the recording. So we'll get started here in a minute. I'm just looking for board members. We've got Maureen on.
They had a long drive.
We had a very long drive, you know?
All right. Mary, Cheryl. Gina's on. Just a minute, we've got a few more people coming on. All right, we'll get started here in a minute. I'm just admitting a few more people in. All right, Mike, you can help me with count. I think we've got, oh, here's Gwen's joining. I think we've got a quorum. So,
4, 5. We have a quorum.
all right. Just need a couple more people in.
6.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. It's like it's slowing down on the waiting room. We have quorum. All right, so just quickly run through attendance for the record. So we have quorum and board members should be unmuted. If not, wave your hand or we'll try to get to you to unmute you. Members of the public will be muted until we get to the public comment sections. Cheryl, okay. And we were going live. Yes, we are live.
Gwen is still muted.
Gwen's still muted. Okay.
Maureen's still
Maureen
muted.
is muted.
Maureen still, yeah.
All right. We've got everybody. Okay. So I think we've got all the board members. We have a quorum and we are live on the YouTube channel and recording on Zoom. So we'll go ahead and call to order, and Juliet's joining right now. So we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order for the special meeting, Region 9 Board of Ed at 7:46 p.m. And the first item on our agenda this evening is approval of the minutes from the April 21st, 2020 Region 9 Board of Education regular meeting. So like a motion from one of the board members.
Todd, Juliet's still muted.
Oh, Juliet's muted. Let me Juliet. Okay. All right. So a motion from one of the board members for the April 21st minutes.
So moved.
Motion.
Is that Mike? And who was the second, please?
Mary Lee.
Mary Lee is the second. All right. I'll open it for any discussions, any corrections, changes, long set of meeting minutes here.
There's a clarification that needs to be made with respect to the reference to grading.
Okay.
So I think, and this is, and Gina, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that we should correct the minutes to read, Barlow has been considering 8 options to address grading. And the state of Connecticut proposed only one grading system for consideration, pass, fail, or pass with distinction.
Okay. And can you reference that section just for the record? Do you know where?
Sure, it is
Section.
in the section, discussion and possible action, grading practices for end of year. It's on page 6.
On page 6. Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other changes, corrections? Yep. Mike, go ahead.
I have one thing, and of course, I do want to say to Juliet that they're fine minutes. They're really well done, and it seems like every time I pick one thing, but it's just to be procedurally accurate, not because I think the content is great, but I'm wondering if on page 5, under the motion for discussion possible action for 2020-2021 budget referendum, I wonder if the motion should read, move that the Region 9 Board of Education use the currently scheduled annual Region 9 district meeting date for a forum to communicate public comments. And I'm not sure that whether that was the motion, but I'm hoping that was the motion because we're doing the comments at the special meeting, not at the annual meeting, because that's a procedural meeting just used for setting the budget number.
Yes, I think that was the intent of the motion. So we need
That's all I
to
have.
make an adjustment on the motion as written. That was your suggestion, Mike, is to make an adjustment on the motion as written.
Yes, just to, rather than saying meeting as a forum, just put meeting date for meeting date to communicate public comments, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
So we're just taking out the as a forum.
Yeah, okay, got it. All right, any other changes or corrections? All right, so don't see any, a few more people into the meeting, so all right. No other changes, then all in favor of the minutes, to approve the minutes from the regular meeting on April 21st, as amended for the discussion. All in favor, say aye, and show of hands as
Aye.
well for the board members. All right, passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, then we will move to the next item, which is public comment. So for members of the public, we will unmute you so you can speak. So please either use the little hand symbol to wave, or wave your hand if you've got your video on. And please limit your comments to about 2 minutes if you don't mind. And we'll try to move through those. If you can also state your name and address again for the record as well. All right, so we'll open it for public comments. A few more people from the waiting room. So if any members of the public would like to comment, the board members can help look for people there. I see Adam Parker. So Adam, give me 1 minute and I'm going to unmute you so you can speak. Okay, Adam, you should be unmuted now. Maybe.
No, he's still
No,
muted.
not yet. All right, we'll try that again.
There you go.
Okay, there you go. All right, Adam.
Thank you, Todd. Hi, guys. My name is Adam Parker. I reside at 70 Wedgewood Drive in Easton. I understand one of the points on the agenda to discuss tonight is the surplus of funds that are sitting in the Region 9 Board of Ed. Currently, it's section line D on the agenda tonight. I would strongly suggest the consideration of returning some or all of these funds back into the towns of Easton and Reading. As many of you already know, we're facing yet again another budget crisis in Easton, in particular with regard to the Easton Board of Education. I'm definitely aware that both towns are under tremendous financial pressure due to unforeseen effects of the pandemic. But they're also trying to come to a sensible and balanced budget, which will meet all of the town's needs. This is going to be very difficult, in particular because of the new legislation coming down from Hartford that is not making it possible for either town to hold a referendum vote. So I know typically surpluses are viewed as a rainy day fund. I would say it's raining, and both towns, Reading and Easton, could desperately use this injection of money for the Board of Ed or for, in general, leveraging against other needs that the town have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Todd, can we let Karen in the meeting?
Yes, she should be in. I just admitted her.
Oh, she's in, sorry, but
Oh,
she's,
no worries.
Thank you.
I see Devin. So I'm going to unmute you. All right, Devin, go ahead.
Hi, Devin Weibel. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Devin Weibel in Easton. So I want to just echo Adam Parker's sentiments that right now, like the entire state of Connecticut and our two towns, we are facing really an uphill battle when it comes to the overall budget. In Easton, the challenge definitely comes down to our Board of Education and Board of Finance right now is looking potentially at making some pretty steep cuts, which will severely impact the students that your region will be working with and preparing in the next few years. So any monies that can come back to the town of Easton that we can put in our general fund and then use to support our schools, make sure that class sizes are smaller, to ensure that in the middle school that we have an actual media specialist, and that our kids' social emotional health is being supported as they come back hopefully in the fall in person, facing very traumatic situations. It's just going to come back to the Region 9 in spades when they're in the high school. And so really that money coming back to Easton and being used for education is truly an investment in the future in both of our towns. So I hope you'll consider that when you're thinking of those surplus funds and finding a way to bring at least a portion of what the Easton taxpayers have paid back to the town and back to our general fund. And thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right, any other members of the public? Again, either use the hands up symbol or wave so we can see you on the cameras.
Todd, I think Jenny.
Jenny?
Yeah.
Okay. Jenny, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you, guys. Hope everybody's hanging in there tonight. Thanks for having us. Two things, and if I'm completely late to the game on this, I apologize. I hope the board will go ahead with their own budget and not make any further cuts. I don't know exactly what the details are as far as that goes, but I hear a lot of rumblings in town asking you to maybe go back and make some drastic changes to it. I think it's already low and responsible, so I hope you just stick to your guns and go forward with that and leave it at the 0.9%. And I'm going to sound like a broken record as far as the unexpended funds go. I think we all understand that it's not a dollar for dollar exchange, education money for education money. But when the Board of Finance is sitting there, they're going to look at what's coming in and what's going out, and anything at all that our boards can do to increase the general fund with monies coming back at the end of the year is only going to help all of us down the road. This whole situation has made me think we all need to understand our budget process is better, like the Easton budget process, the R9 budget process, the Reading budget process. To be your own Board of Finance is such a gift. We have to do things like have parents raise $6,000 just to pave a basketball court. We can't afford to consider things like putting 4 walls of gym padding in the gym at Keller versus just 2 of them this year. So the capital projects that you guys are able to consider, the money that you have to potentially put in different areas, the Easton K-8 budget, we don't even come close to those kinds of dollars or possibilities of considerations. So again, I ask you to think about the big picture and just be responsible for everybody as much as possible, given the circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, other members of the public, any other? So Carolyn there, 1 minute. All right, Carolyn, you're unmuted.
Thank you very much. Carolyn Oppenheim, Hunting Ridge Road in Easton. I have a incoming next year freshman. So I'll be starting to carefully watch what's going on with our ER9 right now. I'm carefully for years now. I have been watching and participating in the budget process in Easton. I would like to reiterate, and probably what you're going to be sick of hearing, which is that we hope that you will consider, and I consider this as now I will have kids in both the Region 9 and Easton schools, that you will consider using some of your excess funds towards the rainy day funds. As Adam said, it is now a rainy day, the rainiest. So we would like to get your support in maintaining, getting these kids to you in a way that will be suitable to a Barlow education, because right now we're struggling with some things. To not have a media Spencer specialist, mostly not, obviously not the Region 9's problem, but it's all our problem. So we ask that for your help. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, any other members of the public? And if you'd like to comment, use the little hand symbol or wave if you're on video. Board members can help me look. I don't see anybody else right at the moment. Just do one more pass through. All right. Okay, with that, then I don't see anyone else, so we'll go ahead and close the public comment. And for members of the public, everybody will be muted for the rest of the meeting until the public comment section at the end, and board members will be unmuted so we can carry on with our business. And with that, we'll move on to item number 4 on the agenda, board member comment. So if any of the board members, I won't go around and do roll, but since we're trying to keep the meeting relatively short, but any members of the board have a comment, if you'd raise your hand and we'll call on you. Maureen, go ahead.
I too think that this is the rainy day and we have to think about sending monies back to the town. That's it.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other board members, any other comments? And Karen, I've got you muted, so let me unmute you.
Sorry.
Other comments? I would just add, again, just from a procedural perspective, we did have our annual meeting just prior to this one. So for members of the public on this meeting, wondering what's happening procedurally with the Region 9 budget. We did have our annual meeting prior to this one at 7:30, where we went through the appropriate statements about the budget, putting it out to the public, and that we will be voting at the May 19th regular board meeting, potentially voting at that meeting on the budget to approve it under executive order, CT Executive Order 7I. And we do have an item later on the agenda to review public comments that were submitted into the website as part of that executive order. So I just wanted to make that clarification that we are not voting on our budget this evening in this meeting before we get into the proceedings. All right, any other board member comments? All right, then we will move on into discussion and possible action. The first item A, healthy food certification and exemption for food and beverage items. We have a couple of motions we need to make there. I know, Tom, do you want to introduce this one and we'll get to the motions?
Actually, I'll pass this along to Scott Rice, our
Okay.
Director of Finance.
All right, Scott, let me unmute you. Okay, Scott, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is a motion. These are 2 motions that we typically consider annually in all 3 districts. The purpose of them is that we must certify that all of the food items that we offer for sale to students that are not a part of a reimbursable lunch will meet the Connecticut nutrition standards. And there's some additional language there around that. That's a requirement for us to certify that that is the case annually. And it is true that that is the way that we operate the food service operation. And secondly, we pass a motion in order to exempt ourselves of allowing sale to students of food items that do not meet those Connecticut standards, Connecticut nutrition standards, in certain limited circumstances as listed in the motion. The motion that each of the 2 motions that I've distributed to you are the required language by the Connecticut State Department of Education. And with the approval of these, I will submit them to the state, so we would be then exempt for and certified for the 2021 fiscal year.
All right. So there are 2 motions that if we can have the first motion, if a board member can read it in, they're fairly lengthy. So if someone can make the motion and read it in from the statement, we'll second that and then we can have a discussion on it. So if Cheryl or Mike, or if somebody's got the statement there in front of them,
Sure.
just included in the materials.
I'll move the, I'll make the first motion with respect to the healthy food certification.
Great, thank you.
For the 2021 fiscal year, the Region 9 Board of Education will continue to certify to the Connecticut State Department of Education that all food items offered for sale to students separately from a reimbursable lunch will meet Connecticut nutrition standards. Such certification shall include all food offered for sale to students at all times in all schools and from all sources, including but not limited to school stores, vending machines, school cafeterias, and any fundraising activities on school premises sponsored by the school or by non-school organizations and groups.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
So Mike. All right, we'll then open it for discussion. Any further discussion on the motion as read? Mike, you have a question?
Yeah, so Scott, I wonder if this motion comes up yearly and we have this follow-up discussion yearly as well, that there is some uncertainty as to whether not only financially, but also whether this is the best way to go for the district. I know there's other districts that do not operate under this umbrella. And we always talk about how the wellness committee and everyone is going to review it and discuss and figure out and kind of reassure us that this in fact is the best way for us to go. So I wonder if someone can speak to what that process was, what those discussions entailed, and what the outcome was.
Yes, the discussions started, but they then stopped, and they stopped for a financial reason. Even if we do not continue to participate in the National School Lunch Program or any of the federal school feeding programs, we're still obligated to meet the funding requirements for the free and reduced lunch program.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that we would lose funding that we otherwise receive for those meals. In the early days of my involvement with this discussion, our percentage of free and reduced was at a certain percentage that certainly at a surface level, there was a thought that we could afford to absorb those additional costs. Subsequent to that, the level of free and reduced increased as a percentage of the overall total. And as a result, we didn't feel that it made financial sense to proceed with the discussion at that time. So it was really a financial discussion. I think there's a lot of general interest in making the move, but it does imply some additional obligations, et cetera, that we would have to continue to honor.
Right. And how significant was the increase in free and reduced lunches?
It more than doubled.
Be pretty significant, pretty substantial for it to have that kind of an impact.
Yes, it more than doubled. And the reason that it more than doubled is the state shifted to a model where they also direct certify certain cases, meaning we are notified of people who are qualified. They don't have to independently apply. I think there's a certain set of criteria for that. We received that as an input. When that change occurred, that's when we saw a market increase in the number.
Do you have any idea the approximate number of free and reduced lunches we serve daily?
I do not off the top of my head. On a percentage basis, it's low double digits, I think, 10-ish, 12-ish %.
And the 12%.
Yeah. And I know this is something we review at the Joint Food Services Committee every year. We always take a look at this.
Right. No, it's good. I just want to reassure everyone that we look at this every year and that it's still the best way to go for the district.
Yes. All right, any other discussion on the motion? All right, then, so for board members, again, for the healthy food certification for the motion is read into the record. All in favor, aye, if you could raise your hand as well so I can see everyone, and it looks unanimous. All right, And then we have a second motion, exemption for food and beverage items. So again, if one of the board members could read it in, since it is a lengthy one and we need to have it exact for
I'll read
official
it.
record.
I can read it. For the 2020-2021 fiscal year, the Region 9 Board of Education will allow the sale to students of food items that do not meet Connecticut nutrition standards and beverages that do not meet the requirements of state statute section 10-221Q of the Connecticut General Statutes, provided 1, such sale is in connection with an event occurring after the end of the regular school day or on the weekend. 2, such sale is at the location of the event. And 3, such food and or beverage is not sold from a vending machine or school store. An event is an occurrence that involves more than just a regularly scheduled practice, meeting, or extracurricular activity. The school day is the period from midnight to 30 minutes after the end of the official school day. Location means where the event is being held and must be the same place as the food and beverage sales.
All right. Thank you, Juliet, for the motion. Do I have a second from one of the board members?
Second, Cheryl.
Second, Cheryl. Thank you. All right. It's open for discussion. Any discussion or comment on the motion for exemption for food and beverage items? I know this is another one we do every year. Do we need any clarity on this one, on the sale and hours and so forth?
No. As long as we don't run the play after midnight,
That's correct.
no candy, we're okay, I think. So.
Exactly. All right. Any other discussion? All right. For the board members, all in favor of the motion, exemption for food and beverage items, please say aye, raise your hand. And it looks like unanimous again for all the board members. Thank you. So that concludes item A under discussion. So now we'll move to item B, review of distance learning and potential costs associated with possible enhancements to the current model going forward. And I'll ask before we open this up, we could probably talk about this all night, and we'd like to not do that. I think it's an important topic, so we will try to time box this discussion around it. I don't think we have any decisions that we need to make this evening, but I know several board members asked if we could talk about it to look at, again, potentially any surplus funds and what we might need to do with those around distance learning or other hiring and so forth. So we thought we put it on the agenda for discussion. So I don't know, Tom, if you wanted, or Scott, to tee up the topic a little bit, and then we'll open it for board discussion.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for putting it on for some conversation. We are anticipating that the governor will be making an announcement probably this week about the balance of this school year. And as both New York and New Jersey have indicated that they're going to remain closed through this spring, I'm anticipating a similar announcement from the governor, which means that we'll be remaining in distance learning most likely through the end of this year. The question then becomes, how do we think about the summer and entering into the fall? I think we've all seen predictions or concerns about a second wave of COVID-19. And so we have to anticipate and think about a return to a distance learning format in the fall or in the winter. We simply don't know at this point what that would look like. So we have had some preliminary conversations, but we are not really in a position to give you specific dollar amounts at this time. The Commissioner of Education charged the local regional educational service centers, the RESCs, with putting together advisory boards to come up with a plan for the state of Connecticut. And over the weekend, we shared an email on their behalf, inviting people into what they call the thought exchange to contribute their ideas to that. By the way, if folks had tried to access that website and put in their information, it got more than 1 million responses and crashed their system. So they've subsequently adjusted it, and they say you can go ahead and try a second time to make your thoughts known in that format. So thinking about in broad strokes, if we have to consider the cleanliness of the building to a higher degree than has been typical for us, we're going to want to think about either adjusting the work schedules of our day crew, night crew of custodians to be in a position to improve our cleaning during the day. We don't know if we'll be on a split shift or if we'll do an every other day schedule. I think we have to anticipate that social distancing and 850 students and 150 adults don't go together. So we do not have a plan yet for what that looks like in the fall. But we think that there are two obvious implications are the need to increase the frequency of cleaning down common surfaces, and also implications for transportation. So one thing that we need to look into is the size of the custodial staff, and can we possibly move some of the evening guys forward, or would we even believe that we would need additional staff to maintain cleanliness? In transportation, as you know, we're slotted to have 3 pickups in the morning and 3 drop-offs in the afternoon. If we were to go to a split shift or an every other day shift, there might be implications for additional fuel and bus wear and tear and time of drivers. I think it's important that we're thinking from the start about our parent partnership. If we're bringing kids, if we're not bringing kids all 5 days of a school week, we want to schedule that in a way that most optimizes a parent's opportunity to go to work, and for whole families, K-12, to be either in with us or not in with us, so older kids can help with younger kids. But we think there's a transportation implication there. We are thinking already about, and this is something that we'll have to bring up again on the 19th of March, in special education, we know right now that our teachers and the support staff have done a solid job of doing their best to provide for the needs of our students with individual education plans. But we anticipate that there will be a need for compensatory time or additional services. So special education, we think, might need as much as $60,000 we hadn't planned for in advance. And then we, again, don't know about the implications for special services in the coming school year, as perhaps additional episodes of distance learning might come into play. When we think about the building, there are, I've actually started the work. Gina is working with Walter Zudak, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, and the administrators to think about things like additional equipment or additional furniture that we might need to improve the posture of the building. A very simple example being most of our restrooms have motion sensitive faucets, so you don't have to turn a faucet on or off. I think, we'd want to look at putting that kind of hands-off options in more places. We have not yet had conversations about how do you feed kids without them crowding in on each other. We currently have a 69-minute food feeding schedule where 3 waves a day, where everybody gets in through the cafeteria out to get food. So we're probably going to have to come up with some plans for kids bringing lunches, or lunches being distributed among the building. That in turn has a cleaning implication. We're thinking about how operations of maintaining the building and grounds would have a different emphasis in a period of distance learning. So I think that it's obvious there's a lot of thinking that has to go on. as we're planning for the contingencies of the future. At the moment, our administrators and teachers are wholeheartedly spending their attention making the current iteration of distance learning work. So we would have to carve out even more time on top of all we're already asking of our teachers and students and support staff. We think about possible enhancements to the current model going forward. The current model was reactive to a crisis. We spent the last month and a half creating a whole new approach to high school education, and I am continuously impressed with the degree of commitment that you're getting from your faculty and kids. The big difference would be, how do we leverage the schedule so that it's by design, not by reaction? So that we could continue to use asynchronous learning opportunities. So where teachers are making recordings of lessons and they're putting up materials and they're guiding kids through their own work, but then with an intentional plan that we'd be able to put in place prior to next year, how to convene more synchronous learning sessions, with the understanding that the households of the students, the households of the teachers, we can't assume that we're going to run a remote version of a regular school day where everybody logs in at 7:30 and everybody logs off at 2:12. It's going to have to be a hybrid, but we can do it with greater design. So when we think about who, what, where, when, why, we need to be participating at the state level, because I think the worst thing that could happen in Fairfield County is for each district to go herring off in its own direction. I think we need a regional approach to the fall, and then within our district, we need to ensure that the safety of the students and staff comes right up with our commitment to academic excellence. So a few puzzles that we don't know how to resolve right now are for staff or student who are immunocompromised or maybe of greater susceptibility to the infection rate. We haven't even thought about that. You know, our youngest staff member might be 23 years old. Our oldest staff members are in their late 60s or 70s. So that's a big concern for us. We're certainly concerned about the health and well-being of the kids. And there will be financial implications, but it's hard at this point to do more than put a very round number on what we might need. So that's my summary of where we are at the moment.
Great, thank you. Board members, I saw Mike with your hand.
Yeah, so thank you, Tom. But my focus requesting this, and when I mentioned it at the last meeting as well, I think we're all aware of the fine job our staff is doing and the demands of a difficult situation. And, you know, all due respect, I think the maintenance and building issue is something that's going to have to be worked out as you go along. My intent here was that we're going to be looking at, and we've been hearing all these comments about unspent funds and returning them to the town. And, you know, I didn't comment under board member comment because I think it's important that we all understand when we say unspent funds, and there's this this undercurrent that somehow Region 9 is padding their budget and has all this extra money left over. And I think that if you factored in our unspent funds and our low budgets over the past 2 years, we have actually run on like probably a -2 or a -3% budget over the last 2 years. So it's not like we're, you know, spending tons of money. We are being fiscally responsible, and we are implementing initiatives that have great cost savings, that have been a great benefit to both our students and to the amount of money it costs. So what I'm asking here is that if we're going to determine how much unspent funds there are, before we make promises that we may not be able to fulfill, my ask is, again, giving all due credit to our staff for their efforts. We have to be an entity that's always striving to improve. Just like we look for our students to get better and better, we also have to try and get better and better. And as a board, we have a responsibility to provide those resources to our staff and administrators to be able to achieve that goal of improvement. And so what I was looking for was, again, it's easy to look at, what's the state's going to do, but I think a lot of times we're graded to a higher standard. And so I would say, what are our peer districts doing, and what can we do to improve our delivery of educational services? Do we need additional devices? Do we need additional platforms? Do we need additional professional development to train staff on these additional platforms? How can we increase our, again, delivery of educational services to be, obviously you can't make it the same as it would be if we were in session, but how can we make it as best we can? How can we improve it? And I think it's easy to kick the can down the road and say, well, we're just trying to get through now, and we have no idea how we would do anything moving forward. But I think if you have the vision to look forward, sometimes that can help you when the reality, the situation becomes the reality. And so, again, what I was looking for was guidance on, I understand the staff is very much overtaxed, but we do have a director of digital learning at the high school, or a digital learning personnel at the high school. We also have curriculum director. We have lots of staff members that maybe can put their heads together and figure out, how can we improve? What are some of the other school districts doing that we aren't? What are we doing that they're not? And how do we put together a package that is what's best for our students? And again, what does that cost? Because I would hate to get to next year and say, we would love to have been able to do this. Unfortunately, the teachers have no familiarity with it, and we don't have the package in place, because then we kind of missed the boat. And so this was just a little bit of forecasting here for the future. That was my intent.
I would love to have sufficient staff to do the degree of forecasting that you're interested in. I simply don't know how or who we assign to look at what other districts are up to when we're scrambling to keep ourselves in place. I think the question is well posed, and there are several decisions that the board would have to make by the 19th. For instance, if we sent home our entire staff and we said to them, make it work, take your laptop and make it work, I think we will have to consider what kind of supplies or resources we would need to be preparing for a subsequent return where we're providing the staff with more than one screen to work with whiteboards, with paper, with cartridges for printers and things like that. So there's a potential cost there. You could consider whether or not you want to secure a Chromebook for every kid. We determined through the survey that about 90+% of households do have their own equipment, and it's been functioning so far. But if the kid is using a personal computer through the home network, obviously our filters are not in place to make it safer. So I think probably we need to know from the board a range of what you would be contemplating. I mean, we could easily come up with $300,000 in projections for you. Additional Chromebooks, additional custodial staff, additional equipment for the building. So it is perhaps, it has to probably flow in both directions.
So I guess what I would say is that much of what you mentioned is not doable, because we need something that would be in our current budget. We can't take money from this year and buy the custodian I wanted for next year. We can't do that anymore. And we can't buy devices unless students are going to use the devices this year. And I'm not looking to just spend money. What I'm looking for is, it sounds like much of what we're seeking is training. And so if we could add a couple of PD days for staff to be able to train on these, platforms, educational platforms, that will give us greater capability to be able to deliver something that's closer to what we would be able to do in a normal day. Or, maybe we need some of those platforms that we don't have currently. Those are the type of things that I'm looking for. Obviously, we can't just wave a magic wand and say everybody's gonna, get better. It's how do we get there? What do we need, and what does it cost?
Right. You framed the problem accurately. I think part of the professional, I don't think there are people that we need to bring in to teach people how to use remote instruction. I think we need to provide teachers with predictable amount of time to collaborate and continue to refine their practice. So one thing that wouldn't cost you much is to consider adding a couple hours of professional development release time, early release in the fall, so teachers can continue to work on this. Some of the funding that you currently have for curriculum work can be repurposed to this question of future distance learning.
And I know we talked at the last meeting on the Chromebooks and the devices coming back in. Again, that's something we could purchase from this year if we need to account for any breakage or potential breakage of devices coming back. And if that's still something that we need to look at, I don't think we can go to a one-to-one with the money that we have in surplus. But again, if we need to, accommodate, another cart of Chromebooks to ensure we've got enough to the same levels, right? If they come back damaged, is probably something we could do as well if that's a need. If we think we've got enough in inventory and don't need to do that.
We did not distribute the full inventory of what we have. I think we believe that if we were going to return to distance learning and rely on the current way we're doing it with the family machines as supplemented by ours, I think that we have sufficient in the plan already. But my point is that I don't have the specific dollar amount that you're asking for right now. And I think we'll have to do what we can to have a tighter number for you on the 19th.
Any other board member, any other thoughts, comments? I mean, obviously, we can, still think about this, provide thoughts to me. We can get them back to Tom and to Scott, because again, if we do want to use any of the surplus funds for any items this year, right, we need to get them into the calculation so we can look at that for the 19th meeting.
I
So
had
we
a,
can-
had a
Yeah, go
question.
ahead, Gwen.
As far as PD and giving as much support as possible to our staff while we're within this budget year. And I don't know what's contractually allowable, but I would certainly be in favor of exploring options for a couple of days in June. If, where people would be paid, if that's even an option. I know you can't force people to work extra days, but if there was a way to pay people while we're still in this fiscal year to do more training, if that's, or to have time together to collaborate, if that's what they need. And certainly, to reach out to counterparts in Weston or in at Immaculate. That's a private school, so that's different, but I'm just puzzled because I don't hear I don't hear huge outcries from towns that have gone synchronous about the issues we're concerned about. And the other point that I wanted to make was that I know we're going to have students and staff who are in difficult circumstances, obviously, because it's very likely, and we obviously need to care for them and to reach out. But I think we have to do as much as we can to make everything as sort of routine as possible for most of the students, if we can, just as how we would always provide a free and appropriate public education to every student. And there are students who cannot, be held to have the same standards as many of their peers, and there are accommodations for that. But that doesn't mean that if a kid doesn't have the accommodation that they're held to. So I think that's one thing that I've been tossing around in my head a lot, because I think we obviously need to care for our most vulnerable population, but I want to keep the rigor up for the rest of them. So that's me. And to echo Mike's sentiments, whatever we can provide. I mean, there's no way to make distance learning as good as going to school and being with your teacher and being able to ask a question right there and what have you. But whatever we can, we're the board, we can provide funding for PD. We can provide, if we need 50 new Chromebooks to fill the gap, we can do these things. So tell us, what are the things that we can check off that will remove obstacles for you to help us get to a better place. Because nobody should be worrying about paying for toner cartridges, clearly. That's something the board can take off the list easily, I think, and we should.
So as I said before, the difference being you will be able to go into the next session by design, not by accident. And I don't want the public to be under the misapprehension that there aren't many opportunities daily for students to have direct contact with their teachers. The teachers are, all of them, providing the schedules, convening classes, holding office hours. Our problem is we got a whole bunch of teenagers sleeping till 11 o'clock and perhaps missing some of those opportunities. And how other districts have managed this, I think we need to do a look behind all curtains to see it. I think that what I'm seeing and hearing and observing and getting feedback on is particularly rigorous continuation of our program. I know how much effort the advanced placement people are putting into preparing the kids to the best of their degree and making the best of this situation.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I
but
think
thank
this-
you. I think your observation's a good one. And we'll
Yeah, I wanted to add onto that, knowing, if this week, if we, if Connecticut goes like New Jersey and New York and, doesn't come back into the classroom for the rest of the year, are there other things that we can do this year to help out? I know there's another early dismissal, but is there a need for anything else to continue, and to continue to, push things to make things a little different or continually improve through the rest of this year? So again, do we need another a few hours of early dismissal on top of what's planned right now for the departments to kind of rethink, what do we do for another month of this?
Yep, there's a window already scheduled for the 15th of May. And I don't know, Gina will get back to us if she feels she needs additional time. I think the teachers are budgeting time. They're doing a lot of meeting amongst and between themselves. So thank you.
Okay. All right, board members, any other thoughts or comments? Again, we'll have the May 19th meeting, right? We'll look at surplus funds, but we have that on the topic for here as well. But any other thoughts on that? To
Well, I
continue
guess-
the discussion. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, just a question, if any of us can be of any service in asking any questions that might be appropriate. I know, Stephanie's probably very on top of it, getting in touch with other people, but we can also be scouts.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and then wrap up on this topic, and then let's move to our next one, which is item C, update on grading practices due to distance learning. And there was an email that came out, I think last Friday. So I don't know if Gina or Tom, Stephanie, if one of you want to kind of recap what was in that and what's the plan going forward.
Yeah, let's have Gina speak to that.
Sure. So thank you. Thank you for your attention to this. So there was a memo that went out to our community, and I can just sum up what that grading policy is, and it is in keeping with what is going on in our the districts around us. So it's very similar to what Gwen was talking about in our desire to want to keep the levels of rigor up, our desire to want to keep what's familiar, and still be understanding to our families who are in continued crisis, and those whose situations will change as we continue to go through this. So with that in mind, when we entered distance learning, we combined quarters 3 and quarter 4 together. So it will be whatever a student would have earned in quarter 3, they're going to earn in quarter 4. It was our way to work with PowerSchool and not end quarter 3 on the day that we left for distance learning. We didn't think that that was fair and equitable for our students who still were expecting about another 2 weeks, a week and a half, 2 weeks to get their quarter 3 grades in order. So to put those two together was our first step. And then we wanted to keep with our traditional letter grade assignment, what we would normally do in any school year. The teacher would be assessing, giving feedback on, and assessing student learning. We met with many groups of teachers and kind of vetted all of these ideas. Our teachers predominantly felt that they were in a position where they can assign a traditional grade for the work students are doing. Those of you who have students in our district know the assignments coming home are real assignments. This is not busy work or worksheets. We have students that are completing their lens project, that are writing their history papers, that are moving ahead in their complex math, and even the sciences without labs. It's a very different experience, but there's real learning going on. So we wanted to validate that learning for our students and for our teachers. So assigning traditional grades was something we felt strongly about. But then I mentioned before about the importance of being flexible. Not every student who's not completing the work is just sitting home and saying, I don't want to do it. There's many situations that we're aware of, and I fear there's many that we're even not aware of that are happening with our families. So we wanted to give an option there for a pass option for our families, for students that maybe are getting a grade that's below where they would see themselves normally as a student, they could take a pass. A pass does not impact a student's GPA in a negative way. It doesn't impact a student's GPA in a positive way. It's just neutral. A student does not have to take a pass grade in every subject. It could just be one subject that they maybe were struggling with, or couldn't complete the work because of technology or because of their own schedule. So the option would be for students to ask for a pass grade if they completed enough work that a student, that a teacher felt that they earned that pass grade, the student would get that grade. And we're working on a system to make that easy for students and families. We currently have the quarter or the year ending for seniors on June 1st. It's very much in keeping to when the year would end. That gives seniors a chance to look at what their grade is once those grades are imported to PowerSchool and shared with students. They would have the option to have that conversation, hopefully in the context with their counselor. Is it better to have a C+ in a course, or is it better to take a pass? Depending on what a student is doing and what their situation is. Some students are very happy with that C or that B, and may want to keep that grade. And so it gives families enough time to have that conversation. The graduation for seniors is June 11th, and we won't get into that, but that's when their year officially ends. So we would want those grades to be in the books by June 10th, the day before. That would be the window parents would have to talk about that pass grade. With our 9th through 10th and 11th graders, again, our schedule very similar to if we were in school. Their quarter would close on June 5th. And they would have until the teacher's last day, and the teacher's last work day is June 15th. So once those 9th, 10th, and 11th graders receive their grade, they would go through the same conversation of, do I want to keep this grade? Do I want to pass instead of that grade? They'll have access to their school counselors to make that decision, to their teachers. Gets a little, we had to really think hard about our year-long courses. Those are primarily our freshman courses. Those of you who have been on the board know that we used to be semesterized. Every grade was semesterized. And we moved toward our 9th grade classes being year-long classes. The thinking behind that was that there's a transition period coming from middle school to high school. And sometimes students don't really hit that stride until the end of their second quarter into their third quarter, and then they start really picking up and understanding the expectations. And having a year-long grade is beneficial to students because they're with the same teacher, and that teacher can then have a better assessment and do a better have that assessment be a better reflection of what the students have accomplished. So 9th graders or any student involved in a full year course could choose a pass for quarter 3, 4, but they would get a final year grade. And that gets important in our calculation of GPA. Students need that yearly grade in order to have their GPA calculated and have that GPA spread out evenly over the course of 4 years. That's also something I believe Cheryl mentioned at our last meeting about grade weighting. You need a certain grade in the courses to qualify for that weighted grade in an honors or an AP course. If a student took a pass, but their yearly average qualified them for that, that bump in GPA, they would certainly get that. In order to do all that, we really needed to look at how we were using time and how we were going to administer exams, and were we going to administer final exams. What we came to the conclusion is that we were not going to go into a different schedule if we come back to the school. We're going to continue this outline of, as I shared with you about the end of the quarters, we're not going to go into a traditional exam schedule where we have 2-hour length exams and half days of school.
there'll be a final assessment of some sort in every class, because there has to be one last test, one final assessment, whether it's a test or a learning activity. But we will not put in an exam 2 column on the report card. We're able to take that right out, and whatever the students are doing in their classes, that will be up to the teachers to communicate what those assignments are, as they have been doing all along. The only caveat I'll put in that is we're used to looking at PowerSchool to get that accurate assessment of student performance. In some classes, that's true. Teachers that go on a point value, for example, their PowerSchool may be an accurate reflection. A listserv message I sent out actually just a few hours ago really stressed, though, to our families that when teachers start to do this calculation of that Q3 and Q4 combined grades, PowerSchool may look a little funky. And I advised everybody to just be calm. And if the grade does not look reflective, give it a little bit of time, communicate well to the teacher. Because of the nature of PowerSchool, anytime a teacher goes in to touch a grade, so if they change a category, for example, students are doing more what you might consider homework on their own, a teacher might want to give more weight to that. Anytime a teacher touches PowerSchool, the students are going to get notification, the parents do. So I think if I could give any one bit of advice, it's take PowerSchool with a grain of salt for a little bit longer until we really are working out what this end of the quarter grade is going to be. The best source of information is the student's teacher, and our school counselors are right on top of all of that as well. So that's our grading policy that we are proposing. We know that what frames that policy is that desire to do no harm to students, to their GPA, no harm to students for their the stress level that they might be under, no judgment call. A pass grade is perfectly acceptable. That was the state's plan, was to do a pass or a fail or a pass with distinction. As many schools in our area, we really felt the need that letter grades were going to be a good option for some students. Other students who want to take the pass, they can certainly do that. There's no, it won't be a problem with the NCAA. Colleges are accepting pass fails for our seniors, so we don't see any downside to that if that's where a student is and that's where they need to be. So if you have any questions, I will be glad to answer them for you, but that's where we are right now with our grading. And I should be remiss to say, we did ask students for their input, for parents. Our steering committee did a lot of this vetting. Tom and Stephanie were at that meeting, those meetings. We had these conversations. We've been having them for the past month or so, as we were trying to unpack distance learning. So we're comfortable with this system, and we know we could implement it with fidelity.
And just before I turn it over to the board members for any questions, just for clarification, the grading policy that you described is different for K through 8 than for the high school?
I would have to ask Tom and Stephanie.
The elementary students will be receiving, their families, the students will be receiving narrative statements from the teachers about the kids' performance. We will not be completing the standards-based feedback. At the middle school, it'll be modeled on very similar to the high school, with letter grades assigned by teachers, ABC, plus minus, pass, fail, with the same option for students to accept or convert individual grades. And again, it's to honor and recognize the kids who have continued to perform to high levels and not penalize them, but also understand the reality of how some kids would have perhaps been achieving higher grades if we weren't in this scenario. So it's a parallel approach.
And Gina, I'll start with the first question. Have you had feedback from public since the message went out on Friday? Mm-hmm. What's been reception to that from students or parents?
It's been primarily positive. There are some parents that wish that the state would have said, just do a pass fail and not give districts the option, because they understand the conundrum that they're in. The students, very mixed. Some are very appreciative. They're working very hard, as Tom said. They're very concerned about their GPA. So the option of having a final grade is very appealing to them. The only questions that I had were about the final exams and how that was going to work. So I attempted to clarify that in today's memo.
Okay, great. Thank you. Board members, any questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Cheryl. I have a question with respect to transcripts. So, and thank you, Gina, for addressing the waiting. So, I know I brought that up last meeting. But with respect to the transcript, so if a student does choose the pass-fail option, right? So regardless of whether or not they're a senior or a freshman, they will have that class show up, pass or fail.
Yes. So in fact, I was just scanning to see, I don't see Paula on right this second, but we had this conversation because what Paula Panos is our director of school counseling. She will have to note on our school profile, as all of the districts will, what our grading policy is. So any receiving school that saw a pass for quarter 3 and 4, or semester 2, because if it's a semesterized course, a student may select a pass for the semester. We have to note that that's how we did it. There's not a downside, as I said, to that, other than your GPA. It's not going to be helped or hurt. So if you are a student who has a very high GPA going in, it may be in your best interest to take a pass for semester 2. But if you were able to get a grade, I think that students work very hard to meet that standard, and that might feel really good to have a transcript with just the grades. We are thinking very hard about our incompletes. So yes, it's possible students could fail. I'll say that right off the bat. Our students that were failing when they went into distance learning, some have really turned it around and they're doing very, very well. Some are not doing so well. And so if we know that the students are, I want to say choosing to fail, but that might sound a little harsh, that might be the grade that students receive. More, I think the case is going to be students who are performing well and who go into distance learning and then they just can't, for a multitude of reasons, get the work done. We're looking at what an incomplete would look like, or a not yet grade. If any of you have had Fred Barnett as a teacher, he likes that grade, that feedback of just not yet. You'll get there, but you're not there yet. And what that will look like, that factors into what we want to present on the 19th of May, when we look at what our summer academy might look like. That's our summer school. For those of you that don't follow Barlow speak, our summer academy, sometimes those are for makeup credit, sometimes they're to bridge a program from one to another. And what might that look like? So we'll have a better handle on that in May, I think.
Thanks.
Mike, go ahead.
So thank you for the report. I am somewhat surprised that it seems like everyone had a seat at the table and was included in this decision except the board. And I think by statute, this is a board decision. And so it's kind of, I don't know, unsettling to me that the email went out saying this was a done deal. This is how we're doing it. This is how everything is going to be. We get a presentation that says we work with counselors, we work with students, we work with everybody, and this is what we feel is the best way to go. But again, it just seems a little unusual that, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a board decision. This is a board, boards of education do set grading practices, graduation requirements. They are board decisions. And so again, it just seems like we're a little out of sequence here, maybe a little bit, you know, out of alignment. And I would have appreciated, you know, we had kind of a gloss over of, we're going to start looking at it. This is what we're going to do. We're going to give you an update at your meeting. And I urged coordinated uniformity, I think, because I believe all the Durgay school districts should do the same thing in order for a kind of a standardization for college acceptances. I don't know what other districts are doing. I don't know whether that was coordinated. And again, I'm slightly concerned that this never came through the board. This seems like it's being decided by the administration. So I'm just a little taken aback, I guess.
So I guess my response, first of all, I apologize if but the board, my understanding is we're not changing our graduation requirements. We're not changing our grade weighting. We're not changing the numbers of credits that a student needs to walk across the stage, virtual or otherwise, at graduation. So those are all board decisions. The grading conversations we've been having and the grading that we've settled on is very much in alignment. We've always had a pass option, but we've made it a little bit more difficult. In the past, a student would have to go to through an administrative review process to ask for that pass grade, and we have given pass grades before. We've given incomplete grades. So it's not a serious departure from where we are or where we've been. We're not changing the weighting of grades at all.
I understand that, but I guess, so you're interpreting, but determination of grading policies and approaches continues to be at the discretion of the local and regional boards of education. Due to local control, these practices vary across Connecticut school districts. This came from the State Board of Education in April. So again, it just seems like we're changing what we're doing. And again, it's done now. It's kind of out there. I just wish we were kind of included in the process. That's all. It just seems like, I mean, I think we normally defer to your expertise anyway. It just seems like it would have been, you know, better form if we knew before it was decided.
If there's anyone to own that one, that'll have to be me, not Gina, not Stephanie.
Well, so my comments are to Tom then, I guess.
And do we know what the other schools in the reference group are doing?
Essentially, it's very similar to what we're doing. Some started with a pass-fail or wanted to adopt the state recommendation, and then they've reverted back now to a grade option because there was an outcry for, similar to what Gwen said, with that level of rigor, and they wanted that reflected on the report card. So what we are doing is very similar to other districts, including not giving final exams in that traditional way.
All right, for the board, any other discussion? Mary Lee?
Yeah, just a question. I know you guys aren't college admissions counselors, but for students who opt for pass-fail because perhaps they had, you know, a really great grade point average at the beginning of the semester or the beginning of the year, and then maybe distance learning didn't work so well, is that going to reflect poorly on them that they took a pass instead of getting the letter grade, do you think?
You know, we had that conversation. I had that conversation with Paula Panos. She thinks it's going to be very much on a case-by-case basis, depending on where a student is applying and to what schools. So I would suggest any family who has any question before making that decision. One of the reasons we wanted that window as large as it could be is so that families could have conversations with the counselors who are in touch with the colleges and also understand the students. And mostly that comment, I think, goes to our 11th graders. Our 12th graders are set. I think it's the 11th graders who are feeling the most pressure and the most stress in making sure that their transcript looks as rigorous as they need it to, and really reflects what they're able to do.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I realize some schools stopped educating basically, mid-March because they didn't have the financial ability for the students to continue learning distance learning. But, we live in a very different area. I just want to make sure that our students are competitive.
Mhm.
All right, any other board
I
member
saw Karen.
comment, questions? Karen, go ahead. You're
So,
unmuted.
Gina,
Go ahead.
Well, kids will be able to see which way it would work in their favor, if it'll work better to do the pass fail, or if it'll work better to do a grade. They'll be able to meet with the counselor and discuss that.
Yeah, their school counselors will definitely be available to them. We are not going to be in the business of running GPAs. What does your GPA look like with it or without it? Or
That's what I was wondering.
We are not we are not going to do that. Our teachers don't calculate GPAs. The GPA is calculated automatically with the through PowerSchool, but the counselor would be in an excellent position to advise a student. Does it look better? Does a student feel that B was reflective, or that grade, they want a college to know that that's what they did and that's what they earned. So I think it will be an individual decision. The teacher is available as far as that conversation goes, but I think it will be an individual decision based on a conversation with the student, the parents, the school counselor, the teacher where appropriate, so that really our goal of doing no harm in our grading practice is going to be what we adhere to.
And it's been communicated to the students and the parents that that'll be available to them.
Right now, we introduced, Tom had sent out the email that said this is our grading. We have not
I saw that one.
announced, right? We have not announced all of the procedural. So if a family decides to take a pass, what would that look like? And I think that would be the time to say, here's the procedural. Maybe at that point we can have Paula add what she has learned from the school counseling department, has learned from our colleges, what is going to look better for which college, and is there a difference? In many colleges, they have said, we'll accept a pass as easily as we'll accept a grade. So it might really just be that mental health of the student. What do they want to see on their report card at the end of the day? And we'll make sure we communicate all of that, Karen.
Okay, that was going to be my follow-up question to Karen's there. In case the students say, I have two students at the high school and one of them read the email and the other one didn't. So just to make sure that, it's getting out to the students, that they understand what's happening would be helpful.
And we'll have that go through the teacher as well, because we'll need a system where the teacher says, this is your grade, and now you have this option, and what should you consider? And we'll make sure that that's communicated well. Multiple times.
Very good.
Sure.
Any other?
Make a TikTok.
Yeah,
exactly.
We get right on that, okay?
Yeah, exactly. They would all see
We'll
it
get
then.
done right away then.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. All right. Any other questions, comments on that topic? Otherwise, we'll move on.
Well, did you want to make a motion and pass the grading modifications, or are we saying that it's nothing different than what we've always done? It's a question.
It's a very good question.
Should we just say we should adopt what's already been?
I would just say, what would be our motion? I mean, it's already out there, so.
Well, I could make a motion that we adopt the grading procedure outlined in Tom's email of today, if that's specific enough. I mean, it can't hurt to have it on record that we're approving it.
For the 2020 academic school year.
There you go.
Okay. All right. So there is a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
So Karen, second.
Wait, just quick question. Mike, you said the 2020 academic year?
1920.
2019.
1920 academic year.
Sorry.
In 2020.
You'd think it was 11:30 already. Sorry.
Just feels like it's gonna be this
2019,
year forever.
2020. Academic year,
All right.
yeah.
All right, so
Thank you.
motion by Mike and second by Karen.
Well, that's Gwen's motion. I'm not stealing.
Sorry, Gwen's motion, my fault, sorry. That's why we recap, so we get it correct. So Gwen's motion with
Very possessive.
second by Karen. Excellent, all right, so
All in favor?
any other further discussion, or shall we go ahead and vote? think
Well,
we've
I just want to
discussed
make
it
a
pretty well.
comment. I don't mind supporting it, but it doesn't sound like we need it, quite frankly. And I think if we vote in the motion, we're contradicting our position in the first place. But I mean, again, if it's just a reiteration of practice, just to make sure that it has been appropriately communicated to the board, I mean, that's fine. But I just want to be on record for saying I don't think it's necessary, but it's fine. You know.
That my intention was sort of as a belts and suspenders, make sure that we're on record as having approved this in case there's ever a question of whether we approved it.
Yeah, I mean, it is different than what we normally do, and that is under our purview, so we should approve it.
Maureen?
I just wanted to say what we're doing is ratifying a decision that's already been made, right? We're not moving
That's
to
correct.
do the decision. So it's just,
You're the attorney. I can't tell you which order we're doing it. I'm just saying, I know that that's our responsibility, so
and
whether
I just want
we
to,
don't do it now, that's fine. I don't care. I'm just saying it's.
and I just wanted to go on record as saying it sounds like it was a prudent and thoughtful and considered decision by the administration.
All right, thank you. Any other board member comment, questions on the motion? And then we'll go ahead and vote on the motion. Could we actually have it recapped? I didn't quite get it. So Juliet, did you capture it, or Mike, can we just, so again, for the record, we know what we're voting on.
But I'll,
Can you take a stab at it? I didn't quite get it all jotted down, so.
Moving to approve the system of grading as outlined in Tom McMorrin's email to students and parents dated, was that today?
Yeah.
Yep.
For the 1920 school.
Okay, got it. All right. So for board members, all in favor, aye. Raise your hand as well. And scanning, okay, passes unanimous. All right, then moving on. Next item, item D, surplus funds update, including potential pension contribution. So we have this one on the agenda. At our last meeting, we had started some discussions around the surplus funds. We had a pension committee meeting since then, which one of the items was looking at our pension contribution. So I know that, and maybe Cheryl Scott can give us an update from that, since we didn't have committee member reports on here. But again, just for other items for board members to think about for the surplus, I'm not looking for the board to vote this evening on the surplus. I'm just, again, trying to get all the items out on the table so that we can have Scott do some modeling for us. And then on the 19th, we can look at the surplus funds. We've already given some direction to the towns on what we think might be there. And we had some caveats. Again, we need to look at pension and bus and some other things that we're still investigating. So that's the reason for this item on here. I don't know if Cheryl, Scott, if one of you wanted to give an update quickly, because pension was one of the items that we wanted to bring back to the board, and that committee has met since the last time.
Sure, I could start and Scott just jump in. So just the soundbite is that the pension committee did move to recommend to Region 9 at its next meeting to make an additional contribution, notwithstanding Todd's comment that we're not going to vote on today, but the committee did advance for the board to potentially vote on using contributing additional $100,000 from available funds to the 1920 fiscal year. So it was a unanimous vote. That said, there was some discussion among the committee that the board could still so choose, and I made my own personal comment as well in the context of the committee, that the board could still so choose not to agree with that recommendation. The committee just wanted to advance it based on the discussion that we did have at the, among the pension committee members. And just a couple other motions, just so you're aware, we looked at the assumptions for salary increases and essentially right-size them to what we consider to be actual practice of the salary increases for those non-certified staff pension plans. So just so you're aware, when pension calculations are calculated liabilities, you factor in future increases. So we had agreed to make a minor change to that assumption going forward. And then we also looked at some other assumptions, but essentially the quick recommendation was for the board to consider $100K additional contribution.
So any questions on that? So again, not looking to go down line by line on what we think the surplus is going to be in the amounts and what we want to do with it, just putting it on the agenda for further discussion if there's anything else we want to have on the table, so that Scott can get a model put together for us for our next meeting. Maureen?
Can I just ask Cheryl to give me a 3-sentence summary on how that figure was derived?
It was derived from just essentially an estimate to determine how it would move the liability. So it really was it was kind of an estimate that I think Scott came up with as a possible contribution, right? So, and that does lower the liability to the extent that it's based on future lives, but then we also do consider the assets, right, which have gone down in value. So even with the additional contribution, we will have a lower funded pension plan than before.
Okay.
So that was part of the contemplate, but really it was a benchmark number that we came up with to figure out if it lower how it would change the funding of the pension plan.
We had asked the actuary to do some work for us in advance of that committee meeting so that there was some level of detail to review. So we needed some number to model around. The result of that assessment was our pension plan at the end of the last fiscal year was on a GASB actuarial funding basis about 93% funded. With the move in the market over the last couple of months, it dropped to about 80%. Just slightly under 80%. So it moved down materially. But this is, as a part of the actuarial practice, accounted for as well when projections are done. They tend to take a 5-year average look at things because it's a very long-term plan. And so if bad things happen for a couple of months or good things happen for a couple of months, you don't want to make your decisions based solely on that. But based on that alone, as Cheryl said, after an extended discussion among all the committee members, we felt that the 100K was a prudent additional contribution to recommend to the board to make. And that would be in addition to the already budgeted actuarial contribution that's in our 2021 budget now.
Is that making up a set percentage of the amount that's been lost, or is that, or you don't know the answer to
It
that?
moved the needle a little over a point, I think.
Oh, okay.
But it really depends a whole lot on where does the market go from here. So there was some modeling on where might the market go from here, that type of thing as well. So
yeah, and there was some discussion in the meeting around, how much do we put back in? Do we try to bring it back up into the 90s or wait for the market to correct? So I think there was a lot of good, thoughtful discussion around, if we should put in additional and how much, and so I think they arrived at a pretty prudent number.
just for context, the market change was a reduction from about 7.3 million account balance to about 6 million. So it dropped about 1.3 million in a couple of months. It had come back by about 400K since the end of March. So it just shows how volatile that is as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we did address, though, I mean, overall, even with the market decline, we're still, our plans are still in a better position if we benchmark against other similar plans, and certainly if you look at other state plans. So we're still, even with or without the additional contribution, in a much better funding position, even with the market decline.
That's what I was just going to ask. Is there a negative impact if we don't add the extra 100,000?
We'll just be lower funded overall, but probably still in better shape compared to peers, and certainly at the state level. I mean, everybody's essentially, all pension plans are taking a hit for this. It's just a matter of how much you want to, if you want to be in a better funding percentage, you know, right now would be probably about 80%, but as Scott said, in the past, we've been at 93. So it's, but there's no way we're going to make that up. unless we fully fund, which we, that's a good amount of additional contribution.
So typically, again, and thank you for the report, and I appreciate the hard work of the pension committee. Typically, the way we budget is based on that actuarial recommendation. And so I realize the pension committee can give guidance as to some of the areas that have some volatility, I guess, or variability. But so I just want to be clear. The actuarial recommendation is to make the contribution that we presently have budgeted and an additional $100,000. Is that his recommendation, or did he not have a recommendation and that was the consensus of the group? Because I think that's helpful to be able to.
No, in fact, he made it clear that it's really not his role to make a recommendation.
Okay.
It's really a committee and a board decision. He can provide input and he can provide calculations and context, but he explicitly said it's not his role to do that. So for sure, what we know is that there is an actuarial calculation that is performed per the normal schedule. That's the number that's currently in the 2021 budget. And this was additional consideration by the pension committee as to whether or not there was a recommendation for any additional contribution or not.
And the actuary's recommendation was pre-COVID-19, right? For the budget number that's currently in there.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, that work was done last fall. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, this is a recommendation from the committee back to the full board. We'll address it, in the next meeting. But again, we just wanted to bring that back because that was one of the charges from the board, was to discuss pension and any additional contributions that we wanted to make there if we're going to do that.
Todd, there are two other material things I could provide an update on.
Yes.
Since we had this conversation approximately 2 weeks ago, I do now have a look at April claims for our medical plan, which is due to a lot of hard work by our HR manager, Vicki Cram, to be able to get me a look at numbers early. So this is not audit finalized, but it's certainly close enough for this level of conversation. Our claims for April were about 132K, which puts them right about what our year-to-date average has been. In other words, it's been another very low month. Now, it just so happens that I also received today communication from Brown & Brown, our broker for the insurance plans, and they issued a pretty clear set of communications, and it wasn't unique to our plan. It was customized to our plan, but they were communicating this to all their clients. And that information was that you're going to see very, very low claim months here in April, May, and June. And it has to do with really the fact that anything discretionary from a dental and medical standpoint has been severely curtailed. They estimated that dental activity is probably at about 10% of normal, and medical similarly so, I'm sure. Their particular point was these things will come back, and they will come back as soon as they're able to come back. That is potentially likely to be after the end of this fiscal year. So they were warning and alerting to be ready for the fact that when a budget number for medical was calculated for next year by them, they certainly didn't take this into account. I think their words were, we're not in the business of unduly burdening a budget. But as factors are changing, and as we're in largely uncharted territory in many ways, we'll see these financial ripples. And they comment we'll have to just continue to stay close to this for some time, as we're likely to see a lot of potential false positives. That's an indication from a financial modeling standpoint over these next 6 months or so, as we just continue to work our way through it. So on the one hand, continued low claims. On the other hand, expect those claims to come back at some time, probably beyond the end of the fiscal year.
Right. And we budgeted flat, right? We did not budget for any increase based upon the levels of our reserve. In other words, based upon our good position, we did not budget what would typically be budgeted as far as an increase in health costs. Is that correct?
Well, I would just be careful in my description of it. It's the calculation that Brown and Brown does is to do a calculation of what they would anticipate the expenses to be next year. So they're going to look at the administrative fees, the contributions from employees, the contributions by the employer, estimated claims, payment for things like an individual stop loss insurance, all of those kinds of things. Their estimate for that for next year ended up being flat to this year. So that it was even independent of the amount of reserve. In other words, they don't look at what do I think your starting position is going to be and how much more do you need to put in or not put in. They really look at what's necessary to get you through that fiscal year from a standpoint of an estimate of all of those financial factors.
Right, but given that that's just really a, best guess, like how we budget, what would be typical increase? What were increases that we're seeing in the other districts or in towns? What would be typical in the state? Maybe, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8%. What would a typical increase year over year be in healthcare costs?
I don't have a good view of that other than our other two districts, which were 15% apiece, which was a function of their claim, experience. I'm sorry?
And we're flat.
Yeah, again, I think it is a function of claims experience because admin fees would be the same, employee contribution percentages roughly the same, differs by bargaining agreement, but roughly the same.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So that's one area that I wanted to mention. And the second is I had also talked about anticipated available funds in the operational budget. And the picture is not complete, but it is becoming clearer in regards to Executive Order 7R, I believe it was, which was the one necessary for the negotiation of transportation costs for the balance of this current fiscal year. So that picture is becoming a little bit more clear now. And I previously forecast about a 1.7 million available at the top end. I would bring that down by about 200,000 at this point. I would bring that down to about 1.5 million.
It's at the top end.
Yeah.
Does that include, I know that Tom mentioned it earlier, and he's mentioned it at other meetings as well, that there is an anticipation of compensatory expenses for special education. Obviously we didn't budget that for next year because we had no awareness of that. I know at the other meeting, I think Tom he threw out 100,000 and he said it could be 120, but it could be 80. Would it be your expectation that we're probably going to see similar costs? And if so, is any of that going to be in the summer, and is that included in your calculations?
It's not included in my calculation because it would be that's a 2021 expenditure. So my figures were related to unexpended funds from this year.
Even if it's services we didn't give this year, we give them in the summer. The fact that it takes place in the summer, it's next year.
Right. Yeah, because it's related to that fiscal year.
We asked Patty Roscoe, our Director of Special Services, to estimate what she thinks she could potentially need in order to provide compensatory services in the coming summer, and her number was 60,000.
So we're chasing 60 off the bat, probably anyway.
Yep.
And Tom, what would that be for? What, like summer class just, or?
That's right, additional service hours. So in special education, if there's a concern or a dispute about the degree to which an individual education plan has been executed, what the student would be eligible for is additional contact hours with the special educator related service personnel. So then that projection estimate from Patty translates back into hours of service.
And Scott, does this also include an estimate of funding, all the stipends, the extracurricular stipends, all of the athletic stipends, everything that we were of the opinion that, because it was my understanding that we were funding all those stipends. So can you, is that all been part of the calculation as well?
It is. Yes, so Gina and her team were able to give me pretty detailed outlook in a number of areas, that being one of them. So I did include those expenditures. I also included things like the reversal of the, in large part, the offset of student participation fees, because with those activities not running, the monies would need to go back to the students and their parents, so that we would not have that benefit of that revenue offsetting our budget.
Right. Because, okay. And we're still, our legal opinion is still that we have to fund stipends and pay for all of the school-related salaries and fees in compliance with that executive order. Is that correct?
That's definitely my understanding.
Not including the the full athletic stipend for the spring season that was terminated by the CIAC for coaches who work for us who are not members of our union.
But are we paying, because some of our coaches are teachers who work at Barlow and.
That's correct. So teachers who work at Barlow are covered by the MOA, the Memorandum of Agreement. There's only, I think, 5, 6 of them. The balance of the coaches received a prorated stipend of 1/5 the amount because the season didn't get underway.
But aren't they the same jobs? I mean, isn't it just sort of?
No. Well, yeah, they're the same jobs, but they're not covered by the Memorandum of Agreement.
So if you have 2 coaches, one of them is getting their full pay because they happen to be a teacher at Barlow, and one is not getting their full pay because they do not happen to be a teacher at Barlow?
That's correct. That's the benefit of being a member of the association.
I'm not sure. So the employees doing the same job, if you're not in the union, you don't get paid. If you're in the union, you get paid.
In the athletic program, we have coaches that are at-will employees for you. They're not a member of any of your associations. Those who are receiving their stipend, their full stipend, because that was the term of the Memorandum of Agreement to cover distance learning with the JBEA. Mm-hmm. Those coaches who are not members of the JBEA, and the only thing they do for us is come in and do that coaching, are not receiving the full stipend for a season that isn't going to run. Of course, that if the board wants to direct us to pay all of those coaches the full stipend, then you could do that, but it's not mandatory under the term of the executive order. And just to preempt your next question, I have that both from 2 separate law firms and a webinar that I attended specifically to ask about it. So.
I'm happy to hear that. So,
well, my next question was going to be that I know that I have a student who is getting who is has a coach who is a member of the association, who is interacting pretty extensively with the team and providing them with targeted workout stuff for what they do as their function of the team and like that, which I think is actually pretty in my observation has been pretty beneficial, because it's sort of keeping the kids together, at least virtually, with this extracurricular aspect. And so, but that, I guess, then is just the luck of the draw for those kids, because if your coach is not a member of the association and not getting paid their stipend, we can't expect them to then be having Zoom meetings and and communicating with the kids for the rest of the season. And I think, so I'm a little, I feel like our kids are getting a different level of support based on whether their coach was a member of the association. So
That's correct. That's right. To be a member of an association, sometimes it works to your advantage. As we started this evening with some public comment, it's raining. And in my estimate, the funds that we would have spent on the athletic season needed to be held in reserve. It's not an obligatory expense. And so what we're talking about is people who are not being paid for a service that they cannot deliver in the spring season. And I understand the emotion and the sentiment connected to it. But I also think that we need to be holding on to every dollar we can in this season.
I respect that, but are we also not still paying our cafeteria staff per the executive order?
Yes, because they're your employees in a different way. They're your part of your, the athletic coaches are not covered by the executive order.
It just feels a little bit icky to me that if you have two people who have an identical job of coaching from, whatever hours, that we're paying some of them and we're not paying others. And we are paying several staff members who cannot work because their job is to serve food to our kids, for instance. So that's
it feels icky to me also, but there's some of these decisions that we have to make in the bigger picture here, and so with regret, I think that it's the appropriate thing to do is not to disperse funds that we can't get a service for and we're not required by the executive order to cover. I think you kind of wandered off of.
Well, I mean, yeah. So the coaches who are still being paid are still going to be interacting with the kids and continuing to do the virtual workouts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then the other kids who have the coaches, those just won't, or they'll do it for free.
No, they might. Many of them probably are.
Yeah, okay.
Well, there's only 4 weeks left anyway.
I just wanted to know the practical question. How many people were affected and how much was the total amount that would have been paid out but wasn't?
Michael, how many coaches do you have in the spring season?
Well, the non-JBEA coaches would be 17 of them. And I think it's approximately like $80,000.
Okay, thank you.
And how many of them are working with kids, do we know? I only know one spring sport, and we've been getting really good support. And it makes me, I don't like to think that some kids are getting that support and some kids are not.
Pretty simple question. Just about all the programs are connecting. It just, they're doing it, they're prepared just in case there was any portion of a season.
Right. So we're just asking them to do it for free.
No, we're paying them 20% of the full stipend.
Well, I'm a little sensitive because I grew up in a union family. My father was a labor leader. I went the other direction. I have been non-union for a long time, so I can see both sides, but I would be concerned that, again, I realize these are not teachers, but I would wonder how it would be if, 3 of your math teachers were getting paid because they're in the union and the other 2 weren't because they weren't in the union. I think it really kind of can have a detrimental effect on the unity and cohesiveness of the group and the desire for those employees to want to, stick with their positions and I don't know. There's just something to be said for loyalty, I think. It's somewhat a little uneasy.
I am sympathetic to that. The board certainly has the right to direct me to pay them all the full stipends. From my perspective, these are guys that we do appreciate. Many of them we're in a long-term relationship with, but this is not their primary salary. That it's a stipend for coaching. So when you don't have an athletic season, you don't have coaches. So they were, for the work they had done before the 13th, we acknowledge that. And I mean, you should either, accept it or override it and move on, or.
Yeah, or I was just saying, yeah, we're getting a bit off topic, and we did agree on the MOA, and it's not just the athletic coaches, right? It's any other services that we've canceled. It's been impacted by it. So if there are any other questions, I mean, the topic at hand around is the surplus funds, and any other direction we want to give Scott so that he can do some modeling for us for the meeting on the 19th.
I just want to, I do have a question with regard to surplus funds, just to recap the numbers, right? So if we're saying the 1.5 is the potential as of this point in time, based on events that are known at this time, that's the potential surplus that could go back to the towns. And then that would be subject to the split between Reading and Easton.
That's correct.
Okay.
And Scott, just to be clear as well, so any of the funds that we've allocated that have been contributed, so any of our other object summaries, I'm thinking 270, 271, those we've made those contributions, or those still subject that we could bring back in as well?
We do not traditionally expend so 270, 271 are the two objects that house the contributions to the health reserve account. We do not traditionally make all of those contributions at once. We tend to meter them throughout the balance of the year. So we have made 6 months worth of contributions to the fund. So 6 months remain. Now I just have to qualify that a little again, because the board had directed me to withhold the 422K originally. So there does remain not yet contributed from this fiscal year. I'll give you a number. A little over 800K that has not yet been contributed, that is still authorized in the 270, 271 objects. So my assumption when I give you a number like 1.5 million is that we would contribute all of those funds to the medical plan as per plan.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So if we wanted to bring the reserve down even more from where we're leaving it flat, but to not put in the remaining money for the, just say for the last quarter that's been already allocated for that. So we could potentially bring the reserve down even more and have a greater surplus.
Correct.
And typically we typically though put that money in. I mean, we've already allocated it. What would the reserve be if we didn't make that final contribution?
If we held right now and did not make any further expenditures, any further contributions, you'd probably have about 800K balance in the medical reserve at the end of this year, the end of June.
Yeah, but then all of our projections from Brown and Brown were made based on the assumptions that those funds were going to be put in.
Again, they don't look at our balance in those accounts. They purely do a calculation based on what they would anticipate next year's expenditures to be.
But so again, I yield to your expertise in this matter, but it just seems strange that if they didn't look at our balance in our health reserve, and they didn't look at whether or not we were going to completely fund this year's expenses, they would still come up with the fact that we don't need any increase year over year from this year to next year. I find that hard to believe. I don't know it's got to
It's
be
like-
part of the calculations that they're
Particularly the-
using the robust reserve as a fallback.
I know for a fact that they don't include it, and they base it on claims experience, and your claims experience this year is 30% lower than it has been traditionally, and that has an effect on when they forward roll these numbers. So self-insured medical plans are all about claims experience, and one of the phrases I heard early on that really rang true with me is you can't outrun claims. So where claims go is where you go. This board is in a position that is reasonably unprecedented, I think over a good 6+ years across all districts, for claims to have dropped this much and stayed this low. To be honest with you, we've probably run 3 different assessments between Anthem, Brown and Brown, and us internally in central office because we cannot believe they're so low. I mean, it's good news, but we're concerned that we're missing something. That there's a mathematical issue, there's a category issue, there's a recording issue of some sort, but we're not. 3 out of 3 times it's been what it's been. So that low experience is driving the low or flat number for next year.
Right. I guess the thing that concerns me is because, I've been on the boards for a long time, and when I was on the Reading board, we used to have this discussion every year about being self-insured or not being self-insured. And I've long held the opinion to get out of the insurance business, but they have always said that we do save money by being self-insured. And they say, if you look at, over the course of time, but then they normally say, yeah, you usually, if you go pretty good for 7 years, just like anything else, the odds start to swing the other way. And I know on the Reading board, we had a very robust health reserve for many years. In fact, giving back lots of money to the towns. And then all of a sudden it goes south. And when it goes south really quickly. And so it's like, so if you say 7 years we've been doing great and let's not pay what we had anticipated paying in this year and we'll just run it down and let it go. If that's the opinions of the experts, I can't argue it, but it seems pretty risky to me. I don't know that I'm comfortable doing that. I'd rather, especially in a year with a pandemic, I just, that seems very incredibly risky to me that, 2-3 people get sick and you're done for. You'll be like Easton going back for 1.4 million. I mean, it can happen overnight,
Any other thoughts from board members? Again, that's another lever that we have. Personally, I'm not in favor of putting all that money that's encumbered already in there. I could definitely look at using some of it, but I don't. I share Mike's sentiment. We've been fortunate, and things could go pretty bad pretty quickly. I don't want to draw our reserve down too much. I think we can have some reserve in there. It should be healthy.
I agree.
Right. And then just 2 other things that I just wanted to check on, just, before we get to that final budget time, as we're looking at unspent funds, I think this, fits in kind of, which is that there's been mention that maybe we would not hire the data analyst position and use that kind of as a contingency. And I would say that I am not comfortable. If we're gonna not hire that position, then I feel like let's yank that money out and give it back to the towns, because I'm not comfortable holding the position and not hiring the position. And the other question that I would ask too is, as far as the time study allowance of $4,000 a district, if if we're going to be so overwhelmed with pandemic planning, digital distance learning planning, and the like, that we're not going to be able to dedicate the time and efforts to that initiative, then I also think maybe we should reconsider that expenditure.
Right. And so those are, again, those are our portion into central office budget, right? That it would take, if we would need to go back in, open our budget, undo those portions of it, would require the other boards to do the same. Yep.
The time
I'm sorry.
in our budget, the analyst position is in central office.
Yep. So again, I think, unless, the other boards are coming back and asking to undo that for savings on the central office side, we've got it in right now.
No, I'm fine with it as long as we're hiring the position.
Yep. Well, that would be the intent, right? All right. Any other thoughts or directions for Scott? Ideally, Scott, we'd be able to have a model from you for the 19th with, some levers in there that we could look at on the surplus fund side so that we can make a further decision. I know we normally vote in our June meeting to do it right at the end of the fiscal year. So, we can hold on longer, but I do know the towns are looking to see directionally where we're going to end up as we continue to, investigate some of the different areas. So it would be good if we can have a model for the 19th that we can talk through in a little more detail. And if we're at a good spot, then that if we need to make the motion and approve what we do with the surplus funds, we could do that earlier than we normally do in our June meeting, if the board would like to do so at the time. But I think it would be good to have some numbers, based on what we know right now, and as things change over the next couple of weeks before the 19th.
I can certainly do that, and the scenarios that I would contemplate would be the traditional ones of contribution to capital plan, contribution to pension plan, contribution to medical plan. And I think that's it.
Yeah, and
I recognize that that's a bit of a moving target, but if it's possible for you to circulate it for us for our consideration, whenever you're comfortable circulating it, but not the day of the meeting, that would be great. I know you usually do.
Yes. And I think we, just to recap again as a board, unless I have it not correct, we were saying the 1% of the budget which were allowed for capital. Today we talked about an additional 100K for pension.
Mm-hmm.
And then nothing in addition into healthcare.
But then whatever's needed as far as the enhancement to our distance learning.
So distance learning coming out, anything else for the summer session, any of those other items that we're aware of right now that we need to take out.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts from the board? Otherwise, we'll close this out. But any other direction to give Scott?
Yeah, I just
right
have
now
one
from public?
other, with respect to the three major items, which is the CapEx, the 1%, the pension plan, and the health plan. If we are to consider a range, I'd just like to compare that to what then the pension funding percentage would be if we included or excluded the 1%, so the other board members can see it. What the impact of an additional 1% on the CapEx would be on the capital spending plan long-term, and then from the healthcare reserve, what the balance would be at the end of the fiscal year if we gave that money back to the towns versus not. So just kind of almost like a sensitivity on how those balances would change based on the board's decisions going into next year.
Thanks, Cheryl. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments, Scott? Any other questions from you or any other clarifications?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, then we'll close out item D. I know it's starting to get late, so we'll move to the next item. so we can get to public comment as well. So this next item, item E, review public comments submitted to central office with respect to the approval of the Region 9 2020-2021 budget under Connecticut Executive Order 7I. So we did agree at our last meeting, just to recap for the public, that we would post on the website public comments around the Region 9 budget, that they would be cut off last Friday in the early afternoon, that the board members would have all the comments from the website circulated to them to have an opportunity to read those, and that we were not going to read the public comments here in this meeting or paraphrase them to any extent. So I have this item on here because we did want to acknowledge that the board did receive all the public comments. We had 20 comments come in from both towns, total 20, 15 yes and 5 no. And they're all still posted on our website, so people can read those. I will open it to the board if they have any comments or any thoughts that they would like to share on the public comment that came in.
I just have
No
one
comments.
thing.
Oh, you have a comment on the comments.
No, just one thing is that I think that statutorily we had to allow those, comments, the opportunity for those comments. But if it is not a excessive burden on the administration, I would advise that we allow those comments to continue to filter through into that same format, that same website, and then you can disperse them to board members prior to the 19th. I just think giving as much opportunity for public input is a good thing.
I agree.
Todd, I do want to say, I read all of them, and as well as Reading had a similar process on the Board of Finance, Board of Ed, Selectmen side. And there were some comments that were directed to just the school education budgets in general. And I just do want to acknowledge the public for engaging and providing very thoughtful comments. And just from, just so people are aware, I mean, I tried to determine how many were yeses and how many nos, and trying to be fair. And I do want to communicate that based on what I've seen in writing, or at least the comments, Todd, that you outlined that we got directly to Region 9, it seems as if the majority at this point in terms of written comments do support the budget that we currently have.
Yep. Yeah, as I mentioned, there were 20 in there, 15 were in support of the budget, 5 were opposed to the budget. I'm as chair, I'm okay with leaving the mechanism open for more public comment to come in between now and the 19th. I would like to maybe formalize it. So again, as we did last time, put a cutoff time, and just again following the same kind of process. So we don't have anybody's comments that show up late Friday night and don't get distributed out to the board members. So I would like to see a motion just to extend the process and the timing on it, if we want to do that moving forward. I'm assuming, Tom, it would be okay to continue to use the same mechanism. Wouldn't be too much of a burden to carry it for another 2 weeks to the 19th, or to the Friday before the 19th. So go ahead, Mike.
So I'll make a motion that the Region 9 board extend the opportunity for public input via email through Friday, May 15th at 3 p.m.
Second.
Sorry, who was the second?
Maureen.
Maureen, thank you. All right. So we have a motion to extend to the public comment mechanism to the 15th of May, 2 p.m. And then the comments to be distributed to the board members for consideration before the vote on the 19th. Any other questions, comments around that motion? All right, then we'll go ahead and vote on it. All in favor, say aye and raise hand. It's unanimous, so we'll move, it passes unanimously. So we will make that available and continue to consider the public comments through May 15th as they come in. Any other thoughts or comments on this? I know we're kind of in new territory here with not going to a referendum and following the executive order, and trying to make sure we're getting public comment in, and still follow our normal schedule as much as we can around budget process for Region 9 as its own district. But any other board member thoughts or comments on process? We're all clear on, we had our district meeting this evening. So on the 19th, then we'll look again at comments that have come in. And then at that time, since we don't need to go to referendum, we can move forward as a board to vote on the budget for Region 9, or make changes if we need to open the budget back up and make any changes to it before we finalize it. Mike.
So one suggestion is, because we are in a unique format this year, I kind of always been of the opinion that prior to the final vote on the budget, it's nice to provide an opportunity for public comment, as long as it doesn't get out of hand. You know, in other words, I would think that it would be a good idea that we have our budget discussion. There's going to be, if I'm saying, if there was any changes or there was any modifications or anything done to the budget or any discussion relating to the budget, but then prior to us voting, allowing members of the public to give some feedback. And again, I like to do this anyway, but I understand it's kind of challenging. But I think, especially given that the taxpayers don't get an opportunity to, to fill in a ballot this year, it's going to be us. I think it's kind of appropriate to give them, a last word before we vote kind of thing. I don't know. That's just a suggestion.
Start the meeting a little bit earlier.
It's just an idea. That's just one board member's.
Like at 4:30.
Yeah. No, I'm all in favor. I mean, it is different times in how we're proceeding here. And there is opportunity, or there could be potential for changes to happen to the budget. So we wouldn't want to make any last minute changes without, sharing those with the public and having some commentary around those. So, but the budget number is as is right now, and we'll post, like I said, the mechanisms available for comments to come in, and we encourage people to put the comments in so we can take a look through those. All right. Anything else on that item? Otherwise, we'll close that out because it is getting later and we want to get to public. We still have a few members of the public on. So we'll move to public comment at this point. So for members of the public, again, if you would like to comment, either use the little hand symbol or wave in your window there so we can see. Try to limit your comments to 2 minutes or less, and announce your name and town address so we can have that in the record. So we'll open it now for any public comment. And if the board members can help me look for people across the windows here, that'd be appreciated. Don't see any hand signs up. All right, Jenny. Yep, Jenny. All right, Jenny, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Mike, I just wanted to respond to something that I heard during the meeting, was that the discussion of unspent funds was somehow a commentary on board operations. I don't think that's the case at all. I think this is a very unique situation. And I think one of the things I mentioned was that I hope people vote. I hope you vote for your own budget. I think you guys have been extremely responsible over decades of board operations. I don't think that's in question at all. In fact, I would comment the opposite. Sometimes I think you're too conservative. Some of the faculty cuts that I on the list looking through the budget seem really unfortunate, but I respect and appreciate that you're trying to make responsible decisions with the finances for Barlow. Listening to some of the conversation, maybe everybody's just mellow because it's the evening time, but I still feel like this excess fund discussion is happening in a bubble. And it doesn't seem like there's a real grasp of the severity of the situation, the gravity of the damage that could potentially be done to the K-8 system. I know in Easton, we're going to be begging for every dollar that we've asked for. A library that's closed, kindergarten classes that could potentially have 25 kids in them, like significant cuts. We just don't have the luxury of these extra monies to decide with what we're going to do. COVID-19 is not, it's not a time for us to pad our accounts. It's a time for us to be conservative and try to keep our school systems intact. And just please, I'm asking again for you to keep that in mind moving forward. And thank you for everything that you're doing. That's it.
Thank you. Any other member of the public like to speak? And wave or use the wave symbol or thumbs up symbol. All right, I don't see anyone else. All right, then we'll close out that item and we'll move to board member comment, item 7. Any comment from board members? Mike, go ahead.
So first, I might have missed it, but I was hoping to see an email, school-wide email that said something like Latin is back or something, you know, something that was inviting everyone to take Latin, like, you know, here's your opportunity. You know, I thought we were going to make some sort of a push to kind of promote Latin. And I haven't seen that. So if I've missed that, if someone could send that to me, that would be great. All I really have seen is like an email from the principal at the middle school, and like the 15th paragraph in, it says something like, if you wanted to take Latin, you know, there's still an opportunity. I would love to see us do something to create some awareness. If we really want to get kids to sign up or reconsider, I would urge a more forceful message. And then again, just, you know, I'm not going to comment on public comment, but I will speak to the issue, which is, you know, I appreciate that that there have been no direct comments in relation to Region 9, their budgeting procedures, but again, not a time to pad our accounts. Again, it certainly is, it certainly does imply a message that is not appreciated, I would say. And I feel that as a board member and a member of the community, that I am always, I always strive to be very thoughtful and do whatever is in the best interest of the towns. And if you know, if the towns are in such a bad state that we have to re-examine things and make draconian cuts just because we have to pay our bills, you know, it's not something we like to do, but this is the business we have chosen, and we are thoughtful, responsible board members that will do whatever we have to do that's in the best interest of our communities. And I applaud my fellow board members because I think everybody feels the same way. I would remind Easton residents that last year, the apportionment swing gave Easton a greater amount of money than they will receive this year, no matter what kind of surplus funds, unspent funds we return to them. No matter how much it comes in, it will not exceed the amount of apportionment benefit they received last year. And there were still cuts to the Easton budget. So I do not believe the two are directly related. I think that there are, you know, community issues that need to be priorities that need to be determined. And I'm hopeful that they will be decided in the best interests of children, obviously. But again, I think I stand behind the work that we have done as a board, and I feel like we're all being, thoughtful and trying to come up with a reasonable budget for both communities. That's just my personal opinion.
And unmute you. Go ahead. Just a second, Karen. There you go. Go ahead.
To Jenny's point, and I'm not sure if she's still on or not, and I just want to assure her, we obviously don't operate in a bubble. We understand, and especially Tom's comments from last week, we're part of a whole. We are the end game of the K through 12 system. So I think that, understanding what our needs are for the high school, we also have to appreciate, going forward in a difficult year, maybe this is the time when we can hopefully look to see whatever we can do to help them, and in some way, hopefully, come through this, and when we can all, do the best we can for our schools all together.
Any other board member comment? I would just say, again, as a board, we are all looking to do what we can to help, the towns. And again, we're in a fortunate position with the low amount of claims that our healthcare reserve is in a higher place. And with the other cuts that we've done, I mean, we did remove teachers, part-time substitutes. We have made a lot of cuts at the high school level, and we still want to do our part to give back what we can from the unspent funds. We've already committed as a board to do that. We've talked about a range of 770,000 to 1.28. So splitting that between the two towns with last year's apportionment, we're in a range of 330 to 540 for Easton and 440 to 735 for Reading, give or take, based on discussions that we've had here this evening. So as a board, again, to the public, we are committed to, helping out and reserving or sending back some of the unspent funds to the towns to help, wherever we can. And we've had to make hard decisions ourselves. I mean, you heard part of the discussion this evening about athletic coaches that we've had to make decisions on here. So I do appreciate all the board's efforts, and we still have some hard decisions ahead, but we will continue to help and do our part and help the towns. Any other comments from board members? All right. Well, with that, then I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Cheryl, second from someone, please.
Seconded.
Second, Karen. Thank you. All right. All in favor? Aye. I'm waiving the discussion on that. So, all right, we'll adjourn at 10:11 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Just as a note too, the Board of Finance meetings are tomorrow night for both towns. So there'll be more discussion on the budget. We'll represent I'll attend the Easton Board of Finance. I think Cheryl is going to go to the Reading Board of Finance. So any board member, if you want to attend either or both, please do so. They are scheduled at the same time at 7 p.m., but both are virtual meetings. So
Is that the first one for Easton for you, Todd?
yes.
So you're going to give the presentation?
Yes, the initial presentation on our budget, yes.
So if you go over to Barlow, there's a trailer that's outside of the auditorium. Inside there's a coat of arms that you put on. Just for safety reasons, just to be sure, because we care about you. Just
We're good. It'll all be good.
Mike's speaking from personal experience, right, Mike?
All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you most of you tomorrow night at the Board of Finance meetings. So thank you.
We're
Good night.
behind you, Todd.
Yeah.
Good luck.